Thank you all. Really appreciate you being here today. Mr. Zelinskis?
That's
Did I
it?
get- Yes. I'm not good with last names. Representative Fee had a question. How long has Ohio had armed teachers in that state?
They've been doing it for 5 years, and the organization that I went through the training has had trained over, as I mentioned, 1,300 faculty, administrative staff, that sort of thing. And I know they don't have exact numbers on actually how many teachers in Ohio that do currently, because there are other organizations that do the training. But they've been doing that for 5 years. I know some other states, ladies mentioned earlier, been doing it a lot longer than that. I know Utah has been one since the 90s. They've had some sort of provision to have people armed in high schools.
Through your research and looking into this, and you yourself deciding to go through this process, and I completely understand that magical time frame between when police arrive, and that's why a lot of people conceal carry personally, because police arrive after something starts, and let's say they're luckily there at the time of the occurrence. School districts with armed teachers, administrators, whatever, how many incidences have they had, whether it was a school violence issue, whether it's with a firearm, another method, or the difference between, or what unfortunate incident? I just was reading an article about, unfortunately, a teacher who had a discharge of a firearm in a school district. What have you seen through your research with both those scenarios?
There haven't been any incidents in Ohio that are like that. Now, I know the thing in California, we don't know all the facts about that, but I mean, if you've gone through proper training, you never ever handle your firearm in that type of situation. It just doesn't happen. That firearm's in your holster, and you'll get that in training. Yeah, I mean, that's a cardinal. You don't bring it out, you don't touch it unless there's going to be an instant in which it's needed. So I'm not sure what happened there. Other provisions, if you are an armed teacher, it's nobody knows who you are, other than the school administrators, and you carry concealed and an approved secure holster. So nobody's going to know how many there are and who they are. The other thing is you avoid getting in situations, let's say there was a fight in a cafeteria, and everybody looks to me, I'm 6'4", 220 pounds. If somebody like me was an armed teacher, I wouldn't even get near that fight. Because again, you wouldn't want to introduce the firearm in some situation like that or have the potential. So a lot of those things, if you have the proper training, again, it's a tool just like anything else. You've got to, have certain things you do and don't do with that particular tool. And so as far, again, over the last 5 years, there's never been any incident whatsoever where, kids have, tried to wrestle the firearm off the teacher, or teachers got upset and shot their kid. I mean, it just doesn't happen.
The bills in front of the House, you mentioned Senator White's, Representative Dush's bills, one the House and one the Senate. Can you review them quickly with us? They're not a mandate. It's up to the locals. What kind of training? Does it specify any kind of training?
Right. I mean, basically, the legislature, I guess, you vote for this and the governor would sign it, would leave it up to the school district whether or not they wanted to have a provision to arm their teachers. So it would then go to the school board, and really pretty much the state would be out of it at that point unless there's some training requirements. The school district on that part, then you have to get the teachers who would first volunteer. They wouldn't be required in any way, shape, or form. After they volunteer, they'd have to be approved and not have a history of anything that would consider to be at risk that they would have a firearm in any instance. And they probably shouldn't be teaching if they were at risk. The next thing that would happen is a teacher would go and get the approved training and then demonstrate competency, and then come back to that district and be able, again, to respond in that situation. So, yeah, I don't think it would be good to have a mandate, again, because some school districts, particularly city school districts, they already have their own police forces in there with metal detectors and police officers right in the building ready to respond. Other school districts don't have that, they have those resources.
I know one concern from law enforcement, talking with one of my chiefs, is upon police entering a building, and it's been mentioned multiple times, their one sole job is to put down the intruder. State police, I was had an active shooter presentation at one of my senior centers. I was there, and they basically said, don't expect us when we're coming in if you're shot on the floor to help you. You're on your own. So, they recommend triage, getting up to date on emergency procedures and those kind of things. But as an armed teacher, did your training help alleviate any concern for police entering the building with armed staff?
Yeah, communication's vital, and that goes into training of what to do after that incident ends and when the police arrive and so forth. And a really good training program and a preparation program would also involve local law enforcement so that there would be communication, a way to identify coming in. I mean, the police aren't going to come in and just shoot anything that moves. That's part of their training. You mentioned they won't stop, and that's true. They won't stop and help anybody medically because the main priority is to stop that person as soon as possible. So, but being able to have the faculty and staff have, similar force-on-force training and, have in practice the police officers arriving on scene and how to behave and what to do, with your firearm at that point and, reholster and so forth and communicate with them, and some of the newer technologies out to be able to communicate them would avoid that type of situation where a police officer would maybe shoot the armed teacher. And the other thing, and I said, to our school resource officer, I'd much rather take the risk of you shooting me coming in on entry as opposed to somebody who I know is trying to shoot me and our kids. I would much rather take that risk as a teacher.
Okay. And maybe Dr. Helsel, you can weigh in on this one. Insurance concerns with arming teachers, have there ever been a discussion about how the insurance side of this would work if your insurance carrier would continue to insure them? And I don't know how it's done in Ohio. I assume those school districts still have insurance.
We've never pursued that, obviously, because we haven't been or thinking about arming teachers, but it was important with our insurance carriers and things for liability to make sure you had the proper certifications and the policies that, the board policies that we had to research and go through our legal, our solicitor's advice and research regarding before arming our other staff members.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Gillen?